You can feel the rope biting into your wrists. The cell reeks of something that isn't quite mold. Music, it's decay. Human decay. You're 19 years old. In the last 2 years, you've done what kings couldn't do. You've crowned a nation. You've shattered siege lines that military strategists said were unbreakable. English commanders have woken up screaming your name from their nightmares, but they got you anyway. Your head is music shaved. The cold air makes your scalp sting like 10,000 needles are pressing into your skin. They dragged you through that humiliation like it was a coronation in reverse, unmaking you piece by piece. Your armor is gone. Your voice doesn't carry anymore. The guards don't flinch when you speak. You signed a paper today. The words are still a blur, but you remember the shape of what they meant. Renounce your saints. Your voices are demons. The visions that change the course of history. Hallucinations. The mission God gave you. A delusion. And wear this. This dress. This suffocating, degrading dress that turns you back into a thing instead of a warrior. You thought you were saving your life. What you actually signed was the perfect trap. And the cruelest part, they designed it so you'd walk right into it yourself. This is the story of how Joan of Arc was legally murdered. How the most sophisticated, legal machine of the medieval world was weaponized against a teenage music girl who had no idea she was walking into an inescapable cage. This isn't just about a trial. This is about the systematic destruction of a human being, using the law as a weapon. And what happened to her in 1431 is still happening today. If you think history is worth getting right, stay close, because this is a story that history tried to erase. Let's go back to 1429. You need to understand who Joan was before they broke her, because that's the only way to understand how they broke her. France is dying. Music, not metaphorically, actually literally dying. The 100 Years' War has been grinding music for over a century. Think about that. A century, 100 years of your nation bleeding out while the English take piece after piece, castle after castle. The South is English, the North is English, the coast is English. Your king sits in a palace in Bourges, uncrowned, watching his kingdom shrivel like a corpse left in the sun. The war isn't just draining gold anymore. Music, it's drained hope. Military commanders are convinced the English can never be beaten. Nobles are making deals with the enemy. Parents are teaching their children that French victory is a fairy tale. This isn't a war anymore. Music, it's an occupation wearing the costume of a war. Then in January 1429, a girl walks into the dance court. She's from Domy, a place so small that most educated men in France couldn't find it on a map. She's illiterate. She's never held a sword. Her name is Joan. And she tells Charles that she's been sent by God to save France. Most people dismiss her as insane. But she's not insane. She's something worse. She's confident. She tells the Dan exactly what he needs to hear. That God hasn't abandoned France, that the English will be driven out, that there's a purpose to all this suffering. He lets her ride with his armies. What happens next breaks every law of medieval warfare. Joan at the siege of Olon, the most important stronghold left in English hands. For months, the English have held it with barely 5,000 soldiers. But English soldiers, experienced, battle-hardened. The French have thrown everything at Olon and bounced off like arrows off stone. Then Joan arrives, and something changes. It's not that she fights differently, it's that the soldiers believe differently. When she rides toward those walls, they follow her. Not because she's given a tactical order, but because something in her presence says, this will not fail, and somehow, miraculously, it doesn't. Or falls. The English commander is captured. The impossible becomes possible. One victory, then another, then another. In May 1429, Joan stands beside Charles as he's crowned King of France at Reims. She's wearing armor. The crowds are screaming. This isn't just a religious coronation anymore. It's a validation. A 19-year-old peasant girl has fundamentally rewritten what is possible. She's proven to an entire nation that the English are not invincible. She's given back something that seemed lost forever. Hope. By summer 1429, Joan of Arc is the most powerful person in France. Not officially. Officially, Charles is the king. But everyone knows the truth. The girl who hears voices from saints is the reason France isn't dead yet. The English music realize this too, and they begin making plans not to defeat her in battle. She's proven they can't do that. She's blessed. Or if you're cynical, she's got luck that defies mathematics. No, they're going to destroy her in a courtroom, because there's one place Joan's divine mandate doesn't work. Inside the architecture of theology and law. In May 1430, Joan is leading troops at Compiègne, a small town near the border between French and Burgundian territory. The Burgundians are technically French nobles, but they've been English allies since the Treaty of Troyes. They're playing both sides, and everyone knows it. A Burgundian soldier nabs Joan during a skirmish. Music, it's almost mundane. One moment she's on horseback rallying troops. The next she's dismounted, surrounded, captured. It should have been the end of the story. A prisoner of war, maybe ransomed, maybe traded, maybe released. But it wasn't. Instead, the Burgundians sold her 10,000 levers to music, the price of a saint. That's the price of the woman who single-handedly changed the course of European warfare. For context, that sum of money could feed a family for 2 centuries. It's not just ransoming a prisoner of war. It's a sale, a transaction. The English aren't buying a girl. They're buying an icon they need to destroy. Here's what's fascinating. Joan isn't valuable because she's a military threat anymore. She's valuable because she's a symbol. She's proof that God favors France. She's living evidence that the English occupation can fail if they can prove she's a fraud, that her voices are demonic, that her visions are delusions, music, that she's a witch working dark magic. Then they haven't just killed a soldier. They've killed an idea. They've made her testimony against herself. They've used her own mouth to recant everything she was. In January 1431, Joan arrives in Rouen, the English stronghold, the military capital of English-occupied France. The trial that follows is supposed to be a religious investigation, ecclesiastical court, bishops, music theologians, church law. It all has the appearance of legitimacy, but it's a show trial. Every aspect of it is choreographed. Joan is held in chains, not in a convent with nuns as church law requires, but in a military fortress with 5 English soldiers guarding her 24/7. The courtroom is filled with pro-English judges. The prosecutor is working directly with English military command. Her advocates are actually judges in disguise, arguing against her instead of for her, and they're prepared to destroy her systematically. For 70 sessions, 70 separate court hearings over months, they hammer at her. The brightest theologians in France versus a 19-year-old girl who cannot read music or write. She has no lawyer. She has no ADV. Iser, she's alone. But here's the thing. She's winning. Not in an official sense. She's never going to convince these judges. But she's winning in a way that matters more. She's winning in the court of human intelligence. When they ask if she knows she's in God's grace, a classic theological trap designed so any answer, music, condemns you. She delivers one of the most perfect responses in the history of language. If I am not, may God put me there. And if music I am, may God so keep me. They ask if God hates the English. She answers, of the love or hate God may have for the English, I know nothing. But I do know that they will all be driven from France except those who die here. It's not defiant. It's not reckless. It's perfect. She's outsmarting men who spent 20 years in universities. She's quoting scripture back at theologians. She's parrying every theological trap they set. Music, they threaten her with torture, show her the instruments, the rack, the strapardo, devices designed to, systematically, dislocate your joints while keeping you alive long enough to suffer. She looks at them and says, truly, if you were to tear my limbs from me and drive my soul from my body, I would not tell you anything more. And then the critical part, and if I did say anything, I would later declare that you had forced me to say it. She's telling them that confessions extracted music through torture are worthless. She understands legal process better than they do. She understands that they can break her body, but her testimony will always be compromised. They back down. They can't torture her, so they switch tactics. If they can't break her through theology or torture, they'll break her through fear and exhaustion. They're going to kill her, but not yet. Not before she signs something. May 24th, 1431. You're dragged out of your cell for the last time. You don't know it's the last time, but your body knows something has shifted in how the music guards touch you. There's finality in their grip. They bring you to the cemetery of Santo, a public place, a square. Hundreds of people are already gathered. No, thousands. Word is spread that this is the day. The day Joan burns, there's a scaffold with 2 preachers on it. Bishop Pierre Couchon is there. The man running the trial, the man who's been orchestrating your destruction. He's pro-English. He's ambitious. He's been trying to become Archbishop of Rouen for years. And the English have made it clear. Condemn Joan and the position is yours. He's going to preach at you now. a final sermon condemning you as a heretic, a witch, a danger to Christendom. Music, but first, they give you a choice. A notary steps forward. He has a document. Music, he explains it, or rather, a short version is read aloud. You'll renounce your visions. You'll admit your voices are demonic. You'll agree to wear women's clothing and obey the church. And if you sign it, your life will be spared. You'll go to prison instead of to the sta. There's an executioner standing right next to the pile of wood. You can see it stacked, dry, ready. You're terrified. You're exhausted. You've been in chains for months. You've been interrogated for 70 sessions. Your body is fragile. Your mind music is wearing thin. And you sign. Later, witnesses at Joan's rehabilitation trial, held 25 years after her death, would testify that the document they actually saw her mark was only a few lines long. They testify that the full confession the court produced afterward was fabricated, expanded, revised, made more damning than what she actually signed. They'd claim what happened in that moment was a kind of ecclesiastical sleight of hand. She signed something brief and desperate. Music, what they filed in the records, was something comprehensive and damning. But in the end, it didn't matter. The trap wasn't the text, it was the act of signing. They march her back to prison. The crowd murmurs. Some are relieved she wasn't burned. Some are disappointed. The spectacle is over, but not in the way anyone expected. She's going to live. Music condemned, but alive. Bishop Cochon preaches his sermon anyway, finishing what he started, condemning her from the scaffold while she's already surrendered. The performance continues. She's locked back in her cell. Now, here's where the truth gets colder than the stone around her. Joan believes she saved her life. She believes that the promise was real. Life in prison, that's the deal she made, but her captors never intended to honor it. See, there are rules in inquisitorial law, medieval religious law. If you're tried for heresy and you confess, you can be spared the death penalty. You get prison. Life imprisonment, yes, but life. Mercy technically. But there's a second category that has no mercy. Relapsed heresy. If you're a music heretic who repents and then goes back to heresy, if you relapse, you're automatically handed over to secular authorities to be executed. No trial, no second chance. The relapse itself is the death sentence. The English and Bishop Cochon needed her dead, but they needed her dead as a relapsed heretic. Because if they just executed her for the initial heresy charge, it would look like they'd broken the deal. It would look like murder. It would look like the law itself was a lie. But if she relapsed, if she went back to heresies after signing the confession, then everything was her fault. The law worked perfectly. Music, she had a chance at mercy and threw it away. They engineered the perfect trap. They took her right back to the same military fortress. She was still in chains, still surrounded by 5 English soldiers 24/7. They shaved her head as humiliation. They made her wear the dress that she was promised would save her, but that actually made her catastrophically vulnerable. For months, Joan's men's clothing had been her armor. Not metaphorically, literally. She testified during the trial that she tied her breeches en D-tunic with dozens of tight cords. Music binding them together so tightly they couldn't be removed without destroying the fabric. It was armor against sexual assault. It was protection in a room full of hostile men. Witnesses at her later rehabilitation trial would confirm that English lords had attempted to rape her in her cell. The cords in her clothes were the only thing stopping it. Now she was in a dress, vulnerable, exposed, and she was in a room with 5 male soldiers. Music, the taunts started, the threats started, the promises that if she didn't cooperate, worse things would happen. 4 days passed, 4 days of this. Then something happened that would seal her fate. One night, and here's where the testimony of the rehabilitation trial becomes absolutely critical. The guards took her dress. They took it. She was left with only the men's clothes they had thrown at her in a sack. They gave her an impossible choice. Face the soldiers naked and alone, or put on the forbidden clothes. She chose safety. On May 28th, 4 days after her confession, 4 days into this arrangement, the judges came to her cell. Bishop Chon walked in. The other judges filed in behind him. They found her in men's clothes. Joan told them exactly what happened. She explained that the dress had been taken, that she couldn't defend herself in a dress among men, that she had no choice. But here's what mattered. She also admitted something else. She said her voices had returned, that Saints Michael and Gabriel had come back to her, calling her a traitor for signing the abjuration. That she never should have renounced them. That was it. That was the moment the trap slammed completely shut. By her own testimony in the judge's presence in front of witnesses, she had returned to wearing men's clothing, explicit violation of the confession, and admitted her voices had returned. Admission of relapsed heresy. The verdict was immediate, unanimous, no deliberation. She was officially a relapsed music heretic. The promise of life had lasted exactly 4 days. Here's the truly diabolical part. Joan didn't understand what had happened. She thought she was being honest. She thought she was explaining her circumstances. She had no music idea she was reading a death sentence into the record with her own words. She didn't realize that the judges had engineered a scenario where she had to choose between her safety and her survival. They took away the dress knowing she'd put on the clothes. They left the soldiers in her cell knowing what would happen. They counted on her fear and they counted on her honesty, and they weaponized both against her. The English didn't need to torture her. They didn't need to break her will through theology. Music, they just needed to set up the right circumstance and let her human need for basic safety destroy her. It's elegant if you think about it. Music, it's evil, but it's elegant. May 30th, 1431. 800 English soldiers escorted her to the old market square in Rouen. Music. The pea was tall, ready. They prepared it well. The wood was seasoned so it would burn hot and fast. They didn't want this to drag out. They wanted her dead before she could say much more. They stripped her. They dressed her in a white smoke. They put a paper hat on her head that read heretic, relapsed, music, apostate, idolator. She asked for a crucifix. Her friar gave her one made of sticks lashed together with string. Music, just 2 pieces of wood and some binding, but it was Christ. It was enough. She climbed onto the pea. They chained her to the stake. Not loosely, tightly. They wanted to make sure she couldn't fall, couldn't try to escape, couldn't do anything but stand there and burn. The executioner lit the fire. The wood caught immediately. And here's what witnesses reported. She didn't scream. She didn't curse her judges. She didn't rage against God or the English or music, the unfairness of any of it. Instead, she called out to the man who had orchestrated her destruction. Bishop Cochin, I die through you. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. Music, it was her testifying to the truth one last time, even as the flames consumed her. Then she did something that would haunt the consciences of everyone watching. She asked someone to hold the crucifix up high so it would be the last thing she saw. A simple request, a dying woman wanting to look at Christ while she burned. And as the smoke grew thick, as the heat became unbearable, Whitney. SSEs reported hearing her voice above the roar of the flames, crying out over and over, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Not once, over and over. The name repeated like a prayer, like a promise, like the only true thing left in a world that had become entirely corrupted. The crowd watched this, thousands of them. French people who had cheered her, who had been saved by her, music, who were now watching her burn. English soldiers who had orchestrated her death. Priests who had condemned her, nobility who said nothing. And then something happened that the English hadn't anticipated. An English secretary, a man who had been part of the trial, part of the machinery that condemned her, music, watched as her body blackened in the flames, watched as the fire consumed the peasant girl who had threatened an empire, and he apparently cried out in the marketplace, "We are lost, for we have burned a saint." They did everything they could to make sure her legacy would die with her. After her body was completely charred, they ran back the coals to show the crowd her remains, proof that she was a woman, proof that she hadn't somehow magically escaped, music, proof that she was dead. Then they burned the corpse again, and again they kept burning until only ash remained. Then they gathered what little was left and threw it into the river Seine. They were trying to make sure that not even her dust could become a relic, not even her bones could be venerated. They wanted her completely, utterly erased. But something the English didn't account for was already in motion. 25 years later, Joan's family demanded a retrial. The Pope authorized it. And in this rehabilitation trial, over 100 witnesses were called, music priests who had been in the courtroom, judges who had voted to condemn her, guards who had been in her cell, notaries who had recorded documents, soldiers who had guarded her. And they testified under oath in front of the Pope's representative. They testified to the truth. They testified music that Joan's confession had been manufactured, that the document she actually signed was nothing like what was filed in court records, that her imprisonment violated church law, that the guards had been systematically abusive, that her guards had taken her dress, forcing her into an impossible choice, that the entire trial was corruption from start to finish. The rehabilitation trial declared the original verdict a complete fraud. Music Joan's name was cleared. The church officially recognized her virtue. Within a century, she was canonized as a saint. The English had burned a saint, and history proved it. But here's the thing that should chill you in ways that historical facts usually don't. Joan of Arc didn't die in a moment of weakness or spiritual failure. She didn't die because she renounced God or betrayed her mission. She died because she trusted the law. She died because she believed that there were rules that would protect her. She died because she signed a document, thinking it would save her life. And the document was the trap. The system that killed her wasn't incompetent or chaotic. It was perfectly efficient. It had multiple fail-safes. Even when its theological assault failed, even when it couldn't break her through rhetoric, it had a backup plan. It had constructed a scenario where being human, needing safety, fearing rape, trying to stay alive, would become evidence of heresy. It weaponized her own fear against her. And here's the modern relevance that makes you understand why this story still matters. We see this system everywhere now. Music, it's not always literal fire. It's not always scaffolds in medieval town squares, but the architecture is the same. Coerced confessions that get used against you. Legal traps where admitting the truth is itself evidence of guilt. Systems that make it impossible to win. Where defending yourself looks like aggression. Where asking for basic protection music is evidence of criminality. Where transparency becomes incrimination. Joan of Arc didn't die because she was weak or wrong. She died because she was caught in a legal machine that was specifically designed to destroy her, and she had no way to escape it. Music, she signed the paper because she wanted to live, and that want for life was turned into proof of her guilt. That's the echo of 1431 that should terrify you. You've just heard a truth that history tried to bury. Music, the story of a girl who saved a kingdom and was destroyed by the very system that was supposed to protect truth. If you think history matters, if you think these stories deserve to be told accurately and completely, subscribe to my channel, because the truth doesn't need to stay buried. Joan of Arc was declared a saint. Her judges were